My study focuses on the translation of Gomorra into English and German. Roberto Saviano is the author of the book that in 2006 has shocked the political and cultural world. The book denunciation of the young Napolitan journalist immediately imposes itself not only as an accepted bestseller, but above all else a cultural and social and civil earthquake. Saviano, in photographing the reality of the Camorra in its economy, entrepreneurial, social, and environmental dimensions, fuses autobiographical events, investigative journalism, and social analysis. The success of the book arouses the interest of the national and international press. The Economist crowned it as the most important book of 2007, while the New York Times included it among the 100 best books of the year. The success of Saviano was not only in the literary field, but the author had great recognition for the civic engagement, such as Vittorini Award, the Enzo Biaggi Award, and the Borsellino Award. The book has been translated into 52 languages in over 50 countries, as shown in the English, German, Spanish, French, and the other version. From the book, a very popular television series and film and theatre performance were taken. The book, deeply rooted in the Neapolitan hinterland, is a cultural, social, and linguistic mirror and is therefore rich in dialectical expressions. But before going into the aspect of translation, I think it is essential to better understand my study, starting from the history of Italian language up to today's dialects. Let's begin to speak from the Roman Empire, during which we speak a regional Latin, since the very subjugated people speak it with the phonetic and lexical elements of their original languages. With the end of the Roman Empire, there is a great linguistic fragmentation which leads to the birth of vulgaris. In the 13th century it began to write love verses in the Sicilian vernacular. Later, thanks to the work of Dante Alighieri La Divina Commedia, one begins to write in the Florentine vernacular, and even non-Tuscan authors begins to use it. In the De Vulgari Eloquentia by Dante Alighieri, the first book that raises the problem of the unification of the language, at least 14 vulgaris are identified throughout the Italian peninsula. Francesco Petrarca, however, does not agree with Dante's vernacular writing, but prefers the ideal of high, refined, cultured, elite language, referring more to Latin poetry than to the spoken Tuscan. Giovanni Boccaccio uses the Florentine vernacular, and in fact the Decameron has varied audience, not only intellectuals but also merchants and middle class. Between the end of the 13th and 14th century, Florence became an economic and political power at European level. Thanks to Lorenzo de' Medici, the city has a period of great artistic and cultural vitality. Pietro Bembo establishes strict rules to unify Italian language. The Accademia della Crusca carries on the ideas of Bembo and creates the first vocabulary called Vocabolario di Accademici della Crusca. With Galileo Galilei, we witness a true linguistic renewal, thanks to the birth of scientific prose in vernacular. Manzoni is committed to the project of unification of the Italian language by taking the Florentine as a model language. From the second half of the 19th century, a series of events favored the concrete unification of the Italian language. The school, the migration of the North, the diffusion of the press, the radio, the cinema, and the TV. The dialect, like a standard Italian, has its own grammar, but emerged mostly in the spoken word and its use in limited area both geographically and culturally. The Neapolitan dialect has undergone the influences of the civilization with which it has come into contact, the Spanish, French, Greek, and Arabic. As I have already said, my analysis wanted to investigate how dialectical and colloquial expressions of the Neapolitan language were translated into the English and German versions of Gomorra. It turned out that some Neapolitan terms and expressions were flattened through a simplistic denotative translation into a standard language. To briefly outline the content of Saviano's text, it must be said immediately that the author, as careful journalist, described the shady business of the Camorra, where there are people who work directly for the clans, manipulating guns, money, and drugs, or supporting illicit trafficking goods from China. The clans also manages the illicit traffic of toxic waste from the north that it burned just in the area called Fireland. Even children are involved for a handful of money in Camorra activities, and the bosses are their idols. Saviano describes in the chapter entitled Angelina Jolie the dark world of black production of high fashion clothing, behind which there is an exploitation of children, both Italian and the foreigners, for a very modest salary, and where that result of their work is destined to the catwalks of American VIPs, just like Angelina Jolie. The world of Gomorrah is made of silence. Everyone is afraid to speak. But exemplary is the case of teacher who the judge will define a desert rose, as she breaks the wall of silence, decides to denounce a murder. In analyzing how the language of this particular socio-cultural environment was translated, I considered some terms. It was bizarre to read how the famous Secondigliano neighborhood was literally translated to English second mile. The Wayona are neutralized in English with the simple kids or boys. Bizarre is also the translation of the nicknames of some Camorristi. Cicciobello becomes in English fat boy, losing the connotation of reference of the famous Italian doll. The shoes worn by the Italian soldiers, the amphibi, are translated into English with the amphibians, making the reader imagine the animal. The verb faticare, which expresses the hardness of physical work, is rendered in English with a simple work. The character called Amaz, which means a very thin person, was rendered in German with die Stange, with reference to the simple jet. And to conclude, another character called Kabayang, which in Napolitan refers to a blonde-haired person, following a simple literal translation in German, is named Weißes Haupt, which instead means white head. I would like to conclude by saying that, although in the analyzed translation cultural references and specific terms are often altered and diluted in a standard language, the socio-cultural context is preserved and the original message of Saviano arrives with the all-explosive force. Thanks for watching.